I don't know if you can see that, but that screen looks cloudy, it looks grainy, and I can see speckles of mildew. I know there'll be mildew in between the outer plastic piece here with the split image and the ground glass behind it. So I've got to dismantle this and clean all those components. It's a bit delicate. I've got the prism finder assembly all cleaned up now, and the prism's not in stunning condition, unfortunately. I thought it was better than that, but once it was cleaned, once the finder was cleaned, I could tell that the prism was actually not in great condition at all. I'll just shut that noise out. Don't need that going on in the background. Yeah, so the prism is showing slight desilvering. I haven't decided whether that means that it's beyond usefulness or whether it will still be adequate. I'll have a better idea when I actually look through the finder, I think. So, very carefully here, wind the film advance slightly to bring this tab for the frame counter forward out of the way. Check that the focus screen is nice and clean. Lower the finder and prism assembly into position. Oops, something's holding me up and I know what it is. This bracket that I put in temporarily, that was to hold back the spring. That's no longer required because the front of the camera body is holding back that spring in the correct position. Settle this into the body, and that's held in with 3 screws. Two screws with the larger heads on them, either side. Do them up tight. One screw at the back. I'll just punch a hole through that tape. And a screw here with a smaller head goes in there. And get that to start. Let's have another go. Back it up a bit. That's better. Run that screw down. And I can finish cocking the shutter now. There are 2 screws in the chrome trim at the top here. They need to go into place. That's good. Now I'll put the top cover back on. I haven't cleaned up the top cover yet. That's still to be done. I'll do that last of all pretty much, or last of all before I do the Leatherettes. Now I can fit a lens and see how the screen behaves. Here we have the Xenar lens that's going with this camera. check that it goes on there firmly. I've already checked that this works to infinity. Now the shutter is cocked, of course. I've checked that the lens focuses to infinity correctly on the ground glass. On a ground glass at the film plane, that was no problem. It's not showing correctly in focus in the viewfinder. It's showing that it goes beyond infinity. It's showing that the lens comes back further than it did infinity. So I need to move my mirror position here. So I've got the lock screw and the adjustment screw. And the lock screw was undone anyway. The adjustment screw, let's try it there and see how it goes. It's usually worth firing and recocking the shutter in between adjustments, because the mirror doesn't necessarily catch in exactly the same place otherwise. That looked pretty good. Certainly in the right track. Nearly. So what I'm doing is I'm lowering the position of the mirror. That looks pretty good. What's it come back like? No, it needs a little bit more. And just a little bit more. Very close now. I'm doing the lock screw up lightly every time in case that shifts the position at all as it's tightened. That looks pretty good. Try that. That's it. Check that it returns there. Yes. So the focus in the finder is correct now. It matches the lens, and the focus at the film plane is correct. They all of that is correct. So that's good. The prism's in. Yeah, there's a little bit of shading in the prism. It's from silver loss. I'm going to check the other camera. Obviously the better of the two cameras is going back to the owner. If by some chance both prisms are equally bad, I'll be fitting a new prism. Honestly, it's very hard to tell the state of the prism unless it's really bad, if the screen is also very dirty. The screen now is clean and it's free from all those nasty little specks. So this camera, next task with this is to do my meter adjustment, and the meter is adjusted. You can only set it accurately for one light level. If the meter works correctly, of course, it will work accurately for all other light levels inside its normal range. Most likely the selenium cell has aged and it's lost some sensitivity, and that often has the effect that if you set it correctly for higher light levels, at lower light levels it will read too high. It will tell you it'll underexpose for all practical purposes. And that doesn't mean it's reading hot, it's more sensitive for lower light levels. It means that it's not sensitive enough at the high light levels. And by shifting it in one direction, you're making it wrong the other way. Generally speaking, I would just set them up for a light level which is roughly equivalent to a hazy, bright day. That's usually a good place to start, and it means that if the meter is reasonably accurate. If it's lost very little sensitivity, it will be accurate on a hazy day with light haze, bright haze. It'll be accurate on a sunny day, might be slightly out. It'll be happy on a slight light overcast day. As you get down into deeper shade, it's likely to be it becomes less accurate. But if you're mostly a person who's taking your photos in daylight, and you're mostly a person who takes your photos on a sunny day, having a meter that works accurately at high light levels can work well for you. You're not interested in how accurate it is at low light levels. I need to set the meter on this now. It'll also give me a chance to see if the meter is accurate or inaccurate. I expect it to be inaccurate, that's quite normal, but we'll find out more about it. So I calibrate this against a calibrated light source. Basically I set it to an EV value of about 14, I think, at ISO 100, and then check to see how it behaves at lower light levels. So first I'll go and do that and come back when I've got it correctly positioned. I have the meter correctly positioned relative to the dials. So first I'm going to make a line across the back here, across the cord and across the dial, so I can make sure nothing slips while I'm rotating that. I've got to rotate the drum until the notches come to the back where I can get the cord tucked under. There you are, they're visible just there. Now the lower cord I've got to lift above the upper cord, then pull the upper cord into the notches. So it's a bit tricky. I don't want to displace the meter, otherwise I'll be pulling everything apart again. There you go, the lower piece of cord I've got positioned now. I've pulled it up over the top, out of the way, and the other piece, the upper piece, now has to be tucked down underneath through those notches. I'm manipulating this with the end of a wooden toothpick. Not the end of a screwdriver, because I don't want to risk cutting the cord. That's done. Now I can pull the other cord back into position. That's it. So now the meter's correctly set, so that'll be as accurate as it's going to be. It certainly looked pretty good, and certainly within half a stop at the light level I'd set it at, and 1 stop above and 2 or 3 stops below, which is probably good enough, or as good as it's going to be. So that part's done. I just need to clean up the top housing now and put that back on the camera. So I'm looking at this. The window's in quite good order. That should clean up okay. There's a bit of scuffing on it. To be honest, I don't know if it's worth trying to polish that out. You can use Perspex polish on this and it'll work fairly well, but there's always a danger you'll break this while you're trying to do that. So I'll just clean this down. I'll use Naphtha to clean the metal components. I'll use standard glass cleaner, window cleaner. to carefully clean the plastic windows and the glass viewfinder lens at the back, and then the top can go back on the camera. The top can go back on now, so the first thing I need to do is put the spring in place for the meter setting button. Put the meter setting button in place on top of the meter. Some of these buttons have a small spike in the middle that helps them stay on the spring, others do not. This one doesn't. Give that a wipe. Lower the top housing carefully in place, making sure the button comes through the top. Check once more that the frame counter works correctly. Everything seems good. And fit the screws. If you've done this all correctly, you will have 2 chrome screws to go at the end of the top housing here. If you've done it incorrectly, you'll have a nickel plated one because you've used your chrome screw somewhere else. Get this top seated correctly, get this screw in. And get this screw in. I've got a special screwdriver to do this. It's just a standard ordinary screwdriver with the tips ground away to leave me with 2 little points. That's all good. Check those screws are tight. That's good. This little collar goes on the top of the rewind shaft, and then the rewind knob itself. And at this stage the camera is ready to have the leatherettes put back on it. Everything's been cleaned, adjusted, is working correctly. Now the camera can finally be finished up. So I've got to glue back my leatherettes. Given the excitement I had earlier when I'd removed the advance lever while I was changing the base plate, I will be making sure that the frame counter is set to number 1, and so that the lock lever is in position before I remove that advance lever. Yeah, just fell into place there now. That's locked, so that's good. That'll mean that the advance can't shift while I've got this off, while I'm gluing the leatherette back on the base. Anyway, I'll clean that leatherette and then put it back on the camera. Well, there we are, leatherette's all back on. You might remember this one had the leatherette was peeled up at the corner here. That's stuck back down. It's very unremarkable now. There's nothing really I need to do to that. So there's the camera body dealt with. Of course, this camera now accepts Voigtlander lenses just as readily as it would the Kodak S lenses. Next, I've got to service the lens for this camera. Well, I'm sure it's occurred to some of you to ask, why would I want to use Voigtlander lenses on a Retina Reflex? After all, generally speaking, you're only seeing the 50mm, the 35mm and the 100mm lenses about. Well, there is a good reason. It's this. This is a Voigtlander Zoom-R lens, and this will fit this Retina Reflex. Now, you've got to admit, that's a pretty impressive looking lens. The Zoom-R is a 36 to 82mm f2.8 zoom, and I can tell you this thing weighs a hell of a lot. There's no danger of this thing blowing away in the wind. So there's something that you can do with your Retina Reflex if it's been converted, mount's been converted to accept Voigtlander lenses, you can put one of these monsters on it.